Okay, Boxing Fanatics, welcome to the third episode of the Boxing Fanatics podcast. I'm joined again by Oscar Pick from Boxing News Magazine. I think it's only right we start off with last night's fight. A bit of a barnstormer, I would say. David Benavidez versus David Morrell. David Benavidez winning via points in what was quite a competitive fight, quite a dramatic fight in some ways. Oscar, what did you make of the fight last night?
Yeah, I thought it was a good fight, and I thought it was a really good performance from Benavidez. I think we're starting to see with Benavidez now in his more recent fights that he's showing a lot more to his style. I think before he was just known as a puncher, really, but now he's showing that he's far more than just a puncher. I think we saw against Morrell last night, who's a very good technical boxer. A well-schooled Cuban who is known, yeah, for his kind of his footwork and his angles and everything. And Benavidez was able to not outbox him, but kind of outwork him at times. He was able to match Morell's sort of technical prowess in that sense, and I was really impressed with Benavidez. I thought he utilized his footwork a lot more than what we've seen in previous fights, and obviously, he's known for getting a stoppage. At least that's what he was known for down at super middleweight. But now I think we've seen, especially in his last two fights against Morrell and Vosdik, that he's not only, a real hard-hitting puncher, but he's also a very good technical boxer. So yeah, as I say, I think I was really impressed with his performance. Obviously, he got knocked down in the 11th round, and it was actually a decent shot from Morrell. I thought a well-timed sort of right hook, looping right hook really, and obviously Benavidez, he wasn't in any trouble of any sort. It was sort of a flash knockdown, but he then got up and sort of dominated the rest of the round, which was quite good to see. And yeah, I mean, he's a real frightening contender in that 175-pound division. Obviously, you look at the two, the champion now, Artur Beterbiev, but he's obviously rematching Bivol in a few weeks' time.
Mhm.
And Benavidez looks like the obvious challenger for the winner of that fight, which I'm sure we'll sort of talk about in a little bit more detail. But yeah, ultimately, I've been really impressed with Benavidez's run of form of late. He's obviously claimed a few notable scalps against Caleb Plant, Vosdik, Morrell. I think he had one before the Vosdik fight as well, which was a good win. So I'm trying to think.
Andrade.
Andrade, yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, and that was another good performance. So yeah, I mean, with Benavidez, you can't always expect the knockout, but I think what we did see last night was another, methodical, a real polished performance. So yeah, no, I was really impressed.
No, 100%. I agree with you. I thought it was a brilliant performance by Benavidez. I think his technical skills are a little bit underrated. I think his defensive skills are actually quite good. I was watching him yesterday. He's blocking a lot of shots with his arms. He's not really getting hit clean very much. I think his work rate is outstanding. The amount of punches this guy throws, considering how big he is and how many power shots he throws. And that's why they call him the Mexican Monster. He literally just does not stop coming. And Morrell wasn't as active as maybe he needed to be to kind of put a dent in Benavidez. But Benavidez was just relentless. The uppercuts, the body shots. You're right, he was knocked down. It was a good shot by Morrell, to be fair. A nice little right hook. But I thought, to be honest, it was a very competitive fight, but I thought Benavidez, I guess, was always in control. Morrell just kind of struggles to put a dent in him. And also, we're used to seeing Morrell kind of come forward a bit more, but I think it was evident that Benavidez was also the physically stronger guy as well. So overall, we have one hell of a fighter here. He's got the work rate, he's got the strength, he's got the power, he's got the combinations, he's got the shot selection. Though, like I said, his right uppercuts are amazing. What did you think of Morrell's? I guess the talking point is not- the point deduction at the end of the 11th round. Do you think that was deserved? Hitting that, I guess it was another right hook right at the end of the rounds.
Yeah, it probably was to be fair. I don't know if he had a warning for that in any previous rounds. I don't think that was the case, but yeah, obviously it was after the bell, and ultimately the referee can decide whether that's sort of like an instant points deduction or whether he just issues a warning for that. But yeah, I didn't have too many qualms with that really. I thought as you say, Morrell, like he's known for his aggression. He's often sort of applying the pressure on the front foot, and he did try to do that against Benavidez to an extent, but he wasn't really allowed to, fully assert himself in that way, which was particularly impressive from Benavidez, how he sort of established himself, as you say, as a bigger, stronger guy. And yeah, I think maybe Morrell just got a little bit carried away in that 11th round, but I thought it was probably quite a fair call from the ref.
Yeah, yeah, I think so. And ultimately, it didn't really make much difference. I think Morel was down, by a few rounds. So it's not like the point deduction would have swayed the fight for him to win on points or anything like that. He needed a knockout. You hear his cornerman Ronnie Shields literally telling him, like, you need a knockout. And I was actually thinking in a kind of gamesmanship kind of way that by landing that right hook by the end of the round and kind of sacrificing a point, maybe he actually helped himself to get a knockout in the 12th round because Benavidez did kind of do a little wobble. I wouldn't say he was hurt, but he done a little bit of wobble. Obviously, it was a flush shot. But yeah, definitely agree with the referee's decision. And yeah, like you mentioned earlier, I think Benavidez, I think most people would agree now he is kind of pushing himself to the upper echelon of the division. And I think a lot of people are going to want him to fight the winner of Beterbiev versus Bivol. In this moment, obviously, we need to see what happens with Beterbiev Bivol. In this moment, do you think he can be competitive or even victorious against Bivol or Beterbiev?
Yeah, no, I definitely think so. What's quite amazing about Benavidez, in my opinion, is he's come up from super middleweight, where he was obviously a massive, 168 pounder, but he's one of these fighters where you see him on the scales and you kind of think to yourself, it's not like he's sort of shredded or absolutely, ripped to shreds. He's quite a fleshy fighter really, and somehow come fight night he always looks like the bigger guy, and even up at 175 now you're seeing that where he must be rehydrating to God knows what, and he's still massive for the weight, which is just crazy to me. But yeah, I think based off those two performances at light heavyweight, you can't look past Benavidez against either Bivol or Beterbiev. I think, yeah, I mean, I'm sure we can talk about who wins that rematch, but I think at this stage in Beterbiev's career, it's probably, it's the most winnable fight that Benavidez could hope for, really, because I think, in my opinion, Beterbiev showed a few sort of early signs of deterioration against Bivol. I mean, obviously it was still a good performance, but it wasn't the Beterbiev we're used to seeing, where he's so explosive and dynamic. And obviously Bivol, on the other hand, is such a well-rounded fighter in his own right. I think that's probably a more difficult style matchup for Benavidez because obviously against someone like Bivol, he won't have it all his own way in terms of from a technical standpoint. I think Bivol's very intelligent of knowing when to kind of close a gap, and he's able to control the distance really well with his feet. So they're both difficult matchups, but I would make Benavidez probably a favorite against Beterbiev, and I'd see the Bivol fight being a very competitive matchup. So yeah, I think, he could potentially beat both, but failing that, I think he'd be more than competitive in both fights.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a great point you made about his physique, Benavidez. Definitely, it's fair to say not body beautiful, I would say. It's not like Anthony Yard at light heavyweight where he looks like a bodybuilder. But like you're saying, yeah, he looks massive on Fight Night. It's true. He looks enormous. He has mentioned about going up to cruiserweight before, so definitely a big guy. I wouldn't be surprised if he's rehydrating to over 200 pounds. That would not surprise me at all. And I actually agree. I think stylistically, I think Beterbiev versus Benavidez would be almost like a bit of a shootout, I guess. It's almost like who's got more power, who can put a dent in the other guy first. That's what that kind of fight would be. Whereas with Bivol, you're right. I can imagine Bivol just using his footwork a lot more, circling a lot more angles, fast hands. And I think it would be actually a harder matchup for Benavidez. It's true, Bivol. But yeah, both. I think it's hard to say. It's hard to disagree that Benavidez would be competitive with both men at this stage. And like you mentioned, Beterbiev is not getting any younger, and we'll have to see what he looks like against against Bivol in the rematch. Obviously, a lot of people thought Bivol won the first fight, and Bivol's I guess a little bit younger. But again, let's see if he's taken some damage against Beterbiev because those are two tough fights. But the second fight is going to be tough. We have to imagine. Let's move on to the undercards. So Stephen Fulton versus Brandon Figueroa. Stephen Fulton winning in, I guess, more conclusive fashion than in their first fight a few years ago. What did you think of Fulton's win against Figueroa?
Yeah, well, their first fight was really quite not exciting or particularly dramatic, but it was an absorbing fight in the sense that I thought their styles really gelled, and it was a good competitive fight the first time around, and then yeah, this rematch kind of failed to deliver the fireworks that I think the fans were expecting. If I'm honest, I didn't think the rematch made an awful lot of sense. Like obviously the first fight was a decent fight, but then you look at the trajectories of both their careers, and I thought, Fulton might look to potentially take on a different champion at featherweight, and then Figueroa, obviously WBC champion. I thought he'd maybe look for a potentially bigger fight or a more lucrative fight because he was calling out like Inoue, and I don't know if that was ever on the table, but he was sort of targeting, yeah, these kind of mega fights. So yeah, I mean, I don't think the action that we saw last night was particularly great, but it was, as you say, quite a conclusive win for Fulton, and obviously he's become a two-weight world champion now, and he looked a vastly improved version of the Fulton that fought Inoue. Obviously he got ironed out in I think 8 rounds in that fight, and that can happen to anyone who fights Inoue
Yeah.
really, but I think yeah we do forget that Fulton is a very good, talented fighter. He's very skillful. He knows he's very good at countering as he's sort of coming out of the pocket. I noticed that with his performance last night, where he'll sort of shift his feet out of range and he'll find a nice little counter on the end of it. And yeah, I thought it was a decent performance without being outstanding. Like let's be honest, he didn't set the world alight with that performance, but he's obviously claimed the WBC title at featherweight, and I think there's a lot of really interesting matchups in that division. All of a sudden, the featherweight division's just, you know, you've got four formidable champions there. You've got all these contenders sort of hovering underneath, and I think that's a really exciting division now. So yeah, we'll see where he goes from here.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, it wasn't the most entertaining spectacle in the world. Fulton, did what we have to do. I was a little bit disappointed in Figueroa's offense. The commentary actually picked up on it quite nicely. They were just mentioning how Figueroa was kind of squaring up a lot of arm punches. It was just quite very predictable. There didn't seem to be much, much zap on the shots. And yeah, Fulton, I guess, found it quite easy just to kind of pop the jab and just kind of land the sharp counter here and there. As for the matchup, I think it's because Fulton kind of suffered quite a bad loss in a way. He was hurt quite badly in that one. And then in his last fight, I think the guy's was it Carlos Castro. He didn't look great in that fight as well. So I think that was the thinking behind him kind of taking on maybe someone he knows, someone he's beaten, because maybe his confidence did take a little bit of a dip. I think his confidence did take a dip against Inoue. I think he probably thought he would do better against Inoue, but it was quite one-sided. As for Figueroa, again, I mean, I guess yeah, he could have maybe tried to unify with one of the other champions. Maybe that would have been a bit more lucrative, but maybe part of him wanted to kind of avenge that loss to Fulton. Um, but all in all, I'm glad we just got a conclusive winner. I don't think anyone wants to see them fight each other again. To be honest, I'm glad we could just move on from that now. But what do you think about Fulton at featherweight? So featherweight, like you mentioned, is a very interesting division. Obviously, we've got Nick Ball there, which is very interesting. And who knows, Inoue might be there in a year's time. Who knows if he continues to win. Um, but what do you think of Bolton at featherweight? Do you think he can unify, become undisputed? If what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, he's already beaten Angelo Leo, who's the IBF champion.
Mhm.
But then, as you mentioned, you've got Nick Bull there, and he's already expressed an interest in fighting Nick Bull.
Mhm.
So now that he's got a belt, he's got a lot more to bring to the table, and as you say, that's a unification now. So maybe even Nick Bull will look at the Fulton fight and think, that's a good option for him as well. I think Rafael Espinoza as well, the WBO champion. He in my opinion, he's probably the best featherweight in the world because he was the one who beat was it Ramirez he beat the
I believe
Cuban.
so. Yeah, I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah. And he beat him twice. The second time a lot more conclusively. And I think he's one that you would kind of avoid at all costs, just
Mhm.
because of his style. He's got a very, long rangey, awkward style. He hits hard. He's a bit of a nightmare for a lot of fighters. So yeah, I think if Fulton was to fight Espinoza, that wouldn't be a great matchup for him. But against Nick Bull, I mean,
Mhm.
don't get me wrong. Obviously, we're on British shores, so we all love Nick Bull, and I think Nick Bull's obviously he's sort of put himself as one of the best, if not the best fighter in this country.
Mhm.
It was a great win over Raymond Ford, although it was a close fight. And I think if I remember rightly, I might have even edged it to Ray Ford. Even though like that was a sort of weight drained version of Ford. But yeah, I think out of those champions, Fulton would probably have the best chance of beating Nick Bull. Obviously, as I mentioned before, he's already beaten Angelo Leo, but yeah, that's still a really interesting fight, and Nick Bull could still win that fight. He could still easily win that. So yeah, we'll have to see what he does.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that'd be an interesting one. I think Ball and Fulton, like, I think height wise, they're quite similar. So it would be an interesting fight. Obviously, Fulton's a bit more tricky on the back foot. Ball would be coming forward, unleashing bombs. We know Nick Ball very well. Nick the Wrecking Ball, as they call him. So it'd be a very interesting fight. And yeah, I agree. I think Espinoza, that probably is quite a tough fight for Fulton. And I think Nick Ball's probably just a bigger name, if we're being honest. He's a bigger name. He's been on Riyadh season, I think, a couple times now. There's definitely it's more lucrative for him to fight Ball. So I wouldn't be surprised at all to see Ball versus Fulton in a unification on the Riyadh season card. I think that would make sense for all parties, to be fair. And yeah, it would be interesting. I think I would back Ball just because I think Ball's just maybe a little bit too aggressive for Fulton. Fulton maybe sometimes a little bit too tentative. I would back Ball, but still a competitive fight. Let's go to British soil now, where Adam Azim stopped Sergey Lipinets last night in the ninth round. What did you think of the fight?
Yeah, I thought again it was just a good performance, really. I think with these conversations around Adam Azim and Dalton Smith, I mean these two names have just been linked with each other for God knows how long now, and it's getting to that stage where I think the fans are just getting so sick and tired of hearing about it. We just want to see the two in the ring together. But I think the argument in favour of Smith has always been that the experience. And maybe even the technical ability has been on his side. I think we've seen as Adam Azim has come up, he's obviously been, an explosive puncher. He's got these fast twitch movements. He's exciting to watch.
Mm,
But I think the only criticism would be that, he hasn't displayed the sort of um the sort of technical prowess that you need at world level. And I think was it last night? Yeah, last night he kind of put those conversations to bed, really. He
mm,
showed, against a former world champion, albeit someone who's not in his prime, but still, a sturdy, solid operator. He,
mm,
he showed that he's able to mix it up on the inside, that he's able to sort of slip and counter when he needs to. And I think that performance would definitely put him in good stead going forward. Obviously, there was quite a few low blows in there, which
Mm,
might take a little bit of credit away from him. But ultimately, he basically made it just a completely one-sided fight. He dominated from the opening round, and that's all you can really ask of him, really. So yeah, he showed a few more strings to his bow last night, and I
mm.
think hopefully the next fight will be, another step up.
Yeah, 100%. I think Adam Azim and Dalton Smith, they're becoming very synonymous with each other. It's giving me kind of Kell Brook, Amir Khan vibes. You could say F even Fury, Joshua, that kind of thing. And it's like whenever one of them fights, the other one always gets mentioned, but then nothing happens, kind of thing. I think stylistically, I think yeah, Adam Azim definitely has the faster hands. He's probably maybe more athletic overall. I do feel like Dalton Smith actually hits harder than him. I think, and might have maybe better timing, better shot selection. But I think it's very interesting. I think what's nice, I mean, Dalton Smith's actually quite a bit older than Adam Azim, which is sometimes what we forget. Adam Azim's only like 22, so he's really young. Dalton Smith's 27. He's reaching his peak, so that might be another reason why I don't know Boxer or Adam Azim's team. They're not overly keen to kind of make it straight away. I did hear something that it could have been on the Riyadh season cards, but Boxer didn't quite want it. Um, but yeah, a good performance by Adam Azim. Like you said, he had a few low blows, but yeah, he dominated the fight, and yeah, he's doing what he needs to do as a prospect. He's only 22 years old. Sergey Lipinets, like you said, he's seen better days, but a win is a win. Sergey Lipinets he's only been stopped once before. That was by Jaron Ennis. So it's a good win. At the moment, if you had to pick, obviously, I mean, this fight, by the looks of it, it might happen in 5 years' time. I mean, it's just so much drama. But if you were to pick right at this moment, who are you favoring at the moment? Our Smith Azim.
Yeah, well, I was actually speaking to a couple of people recently about the fight, and I was actually quite surprised to see a lot of people were backing Dalton Smith, which shouldn't really be a surprise because obviously, as you mentioned there, he's 27. Some might even argue that he's a bit further on in his professional development, but I do think, like, from what I've seen of Azim, these blistering performances, and I think we forget, the kind of the fight that he had before he won the European title against the Ukrainian, who I forget his name. But that in itself was a good performance against, a decent fighter, even
Mm,
though he went the distance in that one. And yeah, I mean, from what I've seen of Adam Azim, obviously you mentioned the athleticism, the explosiveness, but then obviously trained by Shane McGuigan, I think he's really sort of come on leaps and bounds in terms of his technical side of
mm,
the sport. But yeah, I think I would actually back Adam Azim to beat Dalton Smith. I was impressed with Dalton Smith's win over Zepeda. Obviously, he blew his last opponent out inside a round, which I think a lot of us were expecting him to do.
mm.
And Dalton Smith's a very good fighter in his own right, but I think what I've seen of Adam Azim, he just seems to have that X factor. He just seems, he's a real special talent, and yeah, I see him beating Dalton Smith. I see him becoming, maybe even a multi-weight world champion and one of the best British fighters of his generation. I think he's that good.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, there have been comparisons to like Amir Khan and stuff. Like you said, very, very athletic. I would actually go the other way. I would actually favor Dalton Smith. My thinking is that I think actually Azim might actually be a better all-round fighter. I think you're right. I think he might actually have more talent than Dalton Smith. But from what I'm seeing recently, I just feel like it'd be one of those fights potentially where Adam Azim is winning the fight, but then Dalton Smith sort of lands something quite big and kind of wins that way. It's hard to say because Dalton Smith's not fight. I mean, the Zepeda fight was a good win. The guy he fought for the European title, that was quite a mismatch. So it's quite hard to say. I guess we'll find out when Dalton Smith fights someone at a bit of a better level. But from what I'm seeing, Dalton Smith at the moment. he doesn't need to necessarily box amazingly well to find that kind of that that dynamite shot. Because if I remember correctly, against Zepeda, the rounds were competitive, but when he landed, he really landed. But yeah, I mean, I can see why you think Adam Azim is going to go on and do big things. There's definitely a lot of talent there. Like we say, he's still very young. It's under Shane McGuigan. He could definitely go very, very far. And yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if I see him at welterweight one day, or yeah, definitely welterweight. I think the Ukrainian guy, correct me if I'm wrong, did he not face Ennis as well? Was that not the same one that faced Ennis? Or was that
Um, no, I think
No,
that was a
that's a different
different.
one. No, that's a different one.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah, yeah.
no, that's not him.
That
That's
was a
Chapadzian.
Chukwueze, I think, who fought Ennis. But yeah,
Yeah,
I forget the guy's name to be honest. I feel bad for forgetting his name, but yeah, he was actually quite a decent fighter. To be fair, I think he was actually unbeaten going into that fight as well. And
yeah,
it was a good learning fight for Adam Azim, and I thought he coped with that sort of step up in levels quite well. And yeah, again last night against Lipinets. I thought it was another good performance. It's funny really because obviously Dalton Smith's 27, so there's what a 5 year age gap there. But
yeah,
then they're more or less on the same level now. Like I don't think there's much difference between a win over Lipinets and a win over Zepeda, and that's their two best wins.
yeah, yeah,
So although Dalton Smith should be a little bit further along in his development, I actually think Adam Azim has closed that gap. And yeah, I mean, I just think in that sense he's probably got a higher ceiling because as you say he's only 22. He probably won't even reach his peak until he's about 25, 26,
mm.
and he's got all these years to just continue to learn, continue to improve his skills. So I just think he's probably got a bit more potential than Dalton Smith.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's hard to disagree with that. I think yeah, he is the younger man. Yeah, I think he has got more potential. I think it's just interesting to see who would win right now. But I guess that's why they're kind of letting him marinate. Hopefully, look, we've seen it so many times between British fighters. We know Kell Brook Khan that should have happened long time ago. Fury Joshua still hasn't happened. So hopefully, we get them together and they fight. I mean, it'd be great to see them fight now because like you said, they're in a similar situation. I would love to see them, top a bill in the UK, and then the winner goes on to fight for a world title or something along those lines. But let's see what happens. Let's move on to Chisora versus Wallin, which is happening next. Well, which is happening next. What do you make of this fight? Are you happy to see Chisora back in the ring? I mean, I feel like Chisora's been around for ages. And Wallin's a bit of a tricky customer. What's your thoughts on that fight?
To be honest, I have very little interest in the fight itself. I think Chisora, even though he beat Joe Joyce, which everyone was kind of ranting and raving about that win as if like it was the second coming of something massive. But I just think Chisora he's shown so many signs of deterioration over recent years. Like, don't be fooled by that Joe Joyce performance because Joe Joyce himself is, probably over the hill at this point. He had a long amateur career and he's towards his late 30s now.
Mhm.
I would like to see Chisora retire. I would have actually liked to have seen him retire about 2 years ago, but he obviously wants to carry on fighting, which is fair enough. I mean, if that's what he wants to do, ultimately his health is in his own hands, so no one can really, tell him that he can't fight. He has to make that decision himself. So yeah, we'll see. But I do think Wallin's a very bad style matchup for him. I think we've seen in the past that Chisora, he likes opponents who he doesn't have to go looking for. He likes people that will stand in the pocket and trade with him because he tends to outlast them. He's got a very good gas tank really, and he's able to maintain a high tempo, high work rate, and obviously, he's got quite deceptive power as well. Like he's not like a one punch knockout artist, but he's very heavy handed and he tends to like those sort of phone booth fights where he can really, you know, get off some good work. Whereas Wallin's someone who, as you mentioned, is a bit of a tricky sort of southpaw. He's not particularly great, Wallin. I think we saw that obviously in the Anthony Joshua fight. Like I don't think Wallin's got any any real ambition to, go ahead and win world titles. But I think he can definitely beat Chisora, but what Wallin will do is he'll make it a very, tedious, very slow-paced fight where he's sort of picking Chisora off with his jab, and he might time up if he tries to get in on the inside, and it'll be a very ugly fight, I think, and it could even go the distance, or it might be a late sort of stoppage, and Chisora kind of goes out on his shield, but yeah, I do actually see Wallin winning that fight fairly comfortably, just because I don't think Chisora really offers much at this stage in his career. And also we've seen him, struggle with these types of opponents in the past. So yeah, I don't see this one being a particularly great fight, and I see it potentially being Chisora's last fight as well.
Yeah, yeah, I think Chisora wants to reach the 40 fights mark. So that's why he's carrying on, I suppose. I think the plan is for him to fight in Manchester and then have one in Africa and then he's gonna call it. But I think, yeah, everyone would agree that, Chisora's given a lot to British boxing and it'd be nice for him to come out of the sport with all his faculties intact. And I agree, I can see this going similar to how like the Tyson Fury fights went with Chisora, especially when he was boxing kind of southpaw. I can kind of see Walling incorporating the same sort of tactics. Yeah, using his jab, maybe tying him up when he's close. I'm definitely not expecting a barnstormer. I mean, Wallin does what he does. He's effective. He's a good boxer on the back foot. His best performance probably came against Tyson Fury a few years ago now, where he famously cut Tyson quite badly on the eye, and that turned out to be a hard fight for Tyson. But like you said, I agree about Chisora as well. I mean, I think those two losses to Zhang were devastating. I don't think he's ever been the same since those ones. Um, you know, Joyce had a lot of punch resistance, and I think against Chisora we saw his punch resistance was not where it used to be. But I guess at the very least for Chisora, he has a chance just to kind of have one last hurrah, I guess, in Manchester, and at least from a kind of compassionate sort of way. He's not in with someone who's going to really take his head off. It's more of someone who might gonna, tip tap him for 12 rounds. I just want to touch as well quickly on Canelo versus Crawford. I know it's not been finalized yet, but it looks like it's going to happen. What are your thoughts on this fight? Is this good for boxing? Canelo versus Crawford?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have too many problems with it. In fact, I do actually really want to see it. I think, obviously we've complained in the past about these weird matchups where they're sort of at a catch weight, or, you've got a guy who's moving up several divisions. And I think the fact that Crawford, he's willing to go up all the way from super welterweight, and he's not really a super welterweight. He's a welterweight at best, maybe even a super lightweight, and he's willing to go all the way up to super middleweight. I think that's just a real statement of intent from him. I think that just shows how confident he is of beating Canelo. And obviously there's probably ridiculous money on the table, which, is why both of these fighters are keen to enter this matchup. I think, Canelo wouldn't be paying this any attention unless Turkey Al Sheikh was willing to give him potentially even a career high payday. And we all know how much Canelo's earned over the years. Like, this could be one of his biggest paychecks for all we know. So yeah, I think Canelo's seeing this as a money fight. I think, he wouldn't want to risk looking bad against someone like Crawford, a guy who's moving up all these divisions. Because he said in the past it's a lose-lose fight for him. If he wins, everyone will just say, yeah, you beat a welterweight. That's what you should have done. And if he loses, then that could be catastrophic for his legacy. I mean, obviously, he's a future Hall of Fame fighter, regardless of what happens against Crawford. But then people will always bring up the Crawford loss if it does happen, and say, well, you lost to a welterweight, didn't you? But I just think, and it's a bit of a controversial take because I'm hearing a lot of people say, oh, Canelo will beat him. He's just far too big. But I do think Crawford's got a real good chance in this fight. I think he's just such a special talent. And what I've seen from Crawford over the years, where he just dominated Errol Spence, which I think took us all by surprise, and what he's done in the lower divisions as well. He's barely even, broken a sweat in a lot of these elite level fights. Uh, I just think he's that much of a generational talent that it wouldn't surprise me if he moved up all this weight and beat someone like Canelo, because I think he'll be far too fast for Canelo, and Canelo doesn't have that. He doesn't seem to have that same devastating power that he did have
Mm.
early on in his career. Like we all saw what happened when Amir Khan moved up to face him. I think that fight was at super welterweight, and obviously Canelo was a much bigger guy and ended up stopping him in, I think it was the fifth round with that devastating knockout. But I don't see anything like that happening to Crawford. I think Crawford's shown over the years that he's got a phenomenal chin for a start, and he's also just one of the most complete boxers I think of recent years. It's hard to argue with that. So yeah. I do actually favour Crawford in that matchup, which might surprise a lot of people. But yeah, I'd like to see it get made, and I think he's got a real good chance in that.
I mean, that is interesting to hear. Yeah, I mean, the consensus by a lot of people is that Crawford's just too small to compete with Canelo. Canelo is obviously, I guess, naturally the bigger guy. But then we also forget that Canelo's not that tall. They're actually the same height. And Crawford, I mean, to me, he looks quite big. I mean, he doesn't. Maybe he's, you know, filling out, so to speak. You know, he's having to eat a lot to get to that weight potentially. But on fight now, I don't see them. I don't see it being such a massive size difference. You know, just because they're kind of the same height. It's not like he's fighting Benavidez at super middleweight. Now that would be crazy. You know, Benavidez would literally dwarf Crawford. Canelo's not going to dwarf him. He might be a little bit more thick set and stuff, but yeah, he's not going to dwarf him. And I somewhat agree. I mean, Crawford is very, very skillful. I mean, he hasn't really shown any kind of deterioration. I mean, I guess the Madrimov fight was close. He did struggle a little bit there, but Madrimov is a tricky customer. I mean, it was his first fight as super welterweight, so that was a tricky fight. But Crawford, yeah, he's definitely generational talent. I mean, you could say the same about Canelo, but I guess if we're being honest, Canelo hasn't quite looked his best in his last few fights. Like you said, he struggled to get a few knockouts. He's not, yeah, it's probably past his peak at this point. So it will be interesting to see if Canelo can kind of, yeah, put a dent in Crawford, or if Crawford could just kind of outskill him, so to speak. And I guess, yeah, I think it's exciting because it's at the end of the day, it's 2 pound for pound fighters. I think what people need to remember is when there's weight jumps and these catch weights, it's always better when it's 2 pound for pound fighters. That's what makes it kind of exciting. We've seen it in the past of, Sugar Ray Leonard and like Thomas Hearns, this kind of fights. When it's pound for pound fighters, it's okay to have weight jumps. It's exciting. So look, these are two of the best fighters in the world. If they're going to fight each other, it's gonna be a good spectacle. So thanks a lot for listening, guys. That's everything for today. Thanks a lot to Oscar for jumping on again. And yeah, if you've enjoyed listening to this podcast, by all means, like, comment, subscribe, and share. And yeah, we'll catch you on another one. Cheers.